I'm Jay Williams. I have the privilege of serving as the president of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. I am in my 8th month of an organization that has been in this community for 93 years, and nothing has been more exciting than the opportunity to get to travel across the entirety of the region, each of our 29 communities, and engage in a series of discussions and conversations, and most importantly, listening as we reintroduce the foundation to the entirety of the community. So I'll talk about that in just for a few minutes, but I want to get a couple of logistics out of the way. So this is your community, and we are your community foundation. As has been articulated in the video, we have been in this community for now 93 years and have got a deep and abiding relationship with our nonprofit partners that work in all 29 of our communities. And just to give you an example of some of the investments that we have made here in East Hartford, the Historical Society of East Hartford, the Friends of Center Cemetery, Erase Incorporated, the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology, First Choice Health Centers, Goodwin College, East Hartford Public Schools, just to name a few. And these partnerships are facilitated through our nonprofit organizations, community stakeholders, and also the staff of the foundation. And I would ask the staff of the foundation if you all would just stand up briefly and sort of wave your hand so we can see some of our staff member here. I have said, and I say it very proudly, that while the financial resources that we've been blessed with through the generosity of people from across the region and families across the region, that's our most important tool. But our most important and most valuable resource are our staff members who bring their talent, their expertise. Many of you know them through our investments in early childhood. Richard Sussman leads that initiative. Sarah Sneed leads our K through 12 along with Jacqueline Coleman. Many of you know them through the educational investments, our scholarship investments with Jennifer Holmes. So, we want to make sure that we are coming here really to hear and have a discussion with you about the issues that are facing East Hartford. And this doesn't work if I'm the only one talking. So, this is really about us listening and capturing. I walked in a few minutes ago and there was a lot of engagement and discussion, so I know this isn't a shy group. I've had a chance to introduce myself to each of you. Some of you I've known over the course of the time I've been here. Others I've just meeting this afternoon. But we really want and need this to be a discussion because not only is it valuable for us making sure that we're in tune with the issues of today that are relevant in East Hartford, but we're also in the process of putting together our next strategic plan. And we need for that plan to be informed by the perspectives and the experiences of stakeholders from across the 29 communities, understanding what are the most pressing issues in your community. Where are areas that communities that East Hartford is strong that we can help them be stronger? Where are some of the frustrating points or the pinch points that we can bring, whether it might be financial resources or our intellectual knowledge that is a part of the foundation, or the convening or other tools that we have or that we could consider having that would really help advance the community that is East Hartford. So that being the case, I want to open up this discussion, and I'll take volunteers to start off. And if they're not volunteers, I'll take whoever makes eye contact with me. So, we can do this the easy way or we can do it the hard way. There are educators here, there are teachers here, and I know you put this upon your students. So, maybe I'll start with the educators first. But really, give some thought to what are the things that make East Hartford a special community? What are the things that, cause you to really enjoy the quality of life here, whether you've been here for the entirety of your life or whether you're a new resident from somewhere in the region or outside? Simultaneously, what are some of the concerns that you have? The immediate concerns, the long-term concerns, some of the frustrations. What are the aspirations? That's what we're here to discuss. And I appreciate the fact that we've got a wide variety of individuals. Again, we've got elected officials, we've got educational officials, we've got individuals who are residents of this community, small business owners, we've got young people and people of varying ages. So that's important to us because we want to make sure that the perspective that we have is really reflective of the stakeholders and residents who love or call East Hartford a place to live, to work, or to play. So with some of those opening questions, we really just are interested in engaging in a conversation, and I appreciate the fact that the staff is here to answer some very specific questions as it relates to your experiences with the foundation, your perception of the foundation. And I can tell you that in each of these, we're probably on our 6th or 7th of these conversations. People have been very candid, very frank. So if you've had an experience with the foundation that wasn't as pleasant or productive as you would have hoped it would be, please share that with us. And by doing that, it helps us to be a better partner, a better organization. So with that said, I just really open up the floor for the beginning of our conversation. Were you? I don't want to put you on the spot. You look like you were.
Yeah, I'm looking at the two graphs, the circle graphs here, and when I look at that, I don't have anything to compare it to, but it seems to me that there's very little mixture of people who live in East Hartford and also work in East Hartford. You know, that shaded area is very small. And so I think it points out two things. Number one, I think East Hartford needs to have more job opportunities to attract people who live here to also work here. At the same time, it does indicate that there are people who live here in order to, to work nearby. In fact, that's what brought us to East Hartford many years ago, is working in Hartford and wanting to live nearby. So I think, that may be a strength that East Hartford has, but it needs to develop that strength by making it a more attractive place to live, because there's a great deal of competition for residences. And when I look at the other chart, which shows the age expectations for the coming years, what we want to do is bring in more young people, maybe the same types of things that attracted us to East Hartford when we were young. So those were just a quick few observations.
Well, thank you. And what a great way to start. First of all, let me say that you get extra credit because you are the first person who, we've passed these out, people I think have read them and looked at them, but we've never had anybody actually say, you know what, let's talk about the data here. So I'm sure the marketing communication staff, the data staff who works, all the entirety of the staff that works diligently to put this together, you have just made them over the moon in doing that. So let me address a couple of things. The intersection of people who both work and live in East Hartford, that is not an unusual phenomenon to see this be a small shaded area. Unless you are living in a major metropolitan area like a New York City or a Boston or some very large cities, it is very common for smaller and even mid-sized communities to have a small overlap of people who both work and live in a community. So it does present, as you talked about, an opportunity for East Hartford to engage in economic development and community development activities that make it, that enhance it as a place to both live and work. But what it also does, it speaks to the characteristics of our region. That there are a number of people, thousands of people that get up each and every day that live in one community and make a commute, whether it's 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or longer, to other parts of the region to have their gainful employment. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It provides, I think, a dual opportunity to, again, address the East Hartford issues in terms of developing it as a community, but also speaks to the importance of the region, because in reality, each of the communities in our region, and when I say our region, I mean the 29 communities that we serve, absolutely are interdependent on one another. There's the notion, and that's a characteristic that we've been hearing from our conversations, while residents very much love their communities and are interested in talking about specific issues relevant to their communities, there has been a broad acknowledgement of the importance of the connection between the communities. We heard that when we were in Avon and Granby and East Granby and in Canton, how those communities that are a little further out from the capital city still see themselves and understand that connection. So the other thing you pointed out very keenly is this notion of the age in the communities, making sure that our communities, as you talked about, what was appealing to you, and your spouse so many years, not so many years ago, but a few years ago. I'm getting in trouble here. I'm like, when you say, however many years ago it was, how do communities not say, well, that's, that was then and this is now? How do you become attractive to families who are just starting off? Individuals who perhaps don't have families yet, but still see the quality of life in these communities. And these are the types of issues that we don't have all the answers, but what we do want to do is make sure that we understand that these are issues that are important and are on the top of mind of residents and stakeholders, so that together we can begin using knowledge and finding areas and approaches that would be germane and relevant to start answering some of those questions. And they don't happen overnight, they're not easy, but that's exactly why we're here, so thank you for pointing that out. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to just address that question. One of the reasons we don't have a lot of people that work and live here is because we don't have the housing stock. A lot of our housing stock is pre-World War II. The houses are small. They don't have cellars. They only have 2 to 3 bedrooms. A lot of people today, especially young people, when they're looking for a house, they want 3 to 4 bedrooms. They want at least 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. We don't have a lot of land to build some of that, and we also don't have houses, a lot of houses. So what happens is people come here, it's a starter home, and then they move out because they can't find the stock to grow in, and
right.
That's a big issue here. And so we also don't have luxury apartments, so that's why we can't keep them here.
Right. And again, part of what we want to do is, as towns look at those issues and begin considering, whether it's, housing development, which is, a challenge in and of itself, whether some towns have to deal with, zoning regulations and planning. What we've heard is that there are towns that are facing this, but they don't have the resources, either the financial resources or the technical expertise, to begin talking about how do they then plan for that community's evolution over the next 5, 10, 15 years. So for those communities that have identified that as a priority, what we would want to do is work with them to help bring that expertise to bear. Because these issues, it is more than just saying, okay, to your point, let's build houses that have that appeal. When you have mature communities that are fairly developed and pretty much built out, it is much more challenging than that. So to the extent that we start to hear these as priorities of East Hartford and communities, that's exactly the types of conversations we want to have to talk about what we can bring. As a foundation, we have been involved in economic development, generally through some of our investments and our grants, but part of what we're doing is really taking a very long look at how we can be a more catalytic force in community and economic development. We are a community foundation. We will always maintain that, but the board has been very eager to help us leverage the resources that we have that really start to get into areas that, again, historically have not been where we've been involved, but as we hear from the communities about community and economic development, as we see how that can be beneficial to the region. So both of those areas, community and economic development, and I'm using those broadly, that encompass housing and jobs and things like that, are areas of great interest to us. And part of that is being validated by what we're hearing through these conversations. Thank you. So?
Let me begin by thanking you for coming here and listening. That's very important to us, to the town. And also, we appreciate all the foundation does for the greater Hartford area. One of the things that is not listed there is the foundation invested in computers for the library. Mm-hmm. And I think the library is such an asset. So I am very appreciative of that investment. What do I like about East Hartford? I like the river. Mm-hmm. I like the river park. And I like the fact that it's being used more and more. I would like to see East Hartford be designed, like Hartford was just designed, a walkable city, where people ride their bicycles, where people walk, because I think that brings people from all ages to the town. I also appreciate and the investment you have done in education, twofold. If you look at the demographics at the graph, you see that we have a growth in the younger ages. So that's very good because that means it's a vibrant city that is not a retirement community, but it's a such of a vibrant city. So improvement of our school districts, it's a priority. And I know that improvement is happening. Your investment helps. What you have done here, what you just did recently, it's precious. It's really wonderful. And also on Goodwin College, which is doing wonderful things for the city. So I would, again, look at places like the library, community centers where they provide spaces for people of different ages to come together and feel connected and engaged as part of the town and part of the city. So to me, those would be things, and I know that's all is related to economic development. So, but to me, those things are very important, and I see them as, and hope that you will continue to make investment in those areas. So thank you again.
You pointed out, one of the things you pointed out was the notion that this community benefits from having an asset like the river. There are, that is an asset that if you don't have it, you can't create it. And there are communities that are across the country that are rediscovering that as an asset that adds to the quality of life. I come from a river, Youngstown, Ohio, the Mahoning River. The Mahoning River 100 years ago was the reason that the steel mills located there. It was a source of water for the manufacturing of steel, but it was also a source where they then got rid of all the pollutants and sediments. And it was only primarily seen as an economic driver. And then after 100 years of being polluted, it was then seen as an albatross and something to turn away from. Well, because then the foresight wasn't necessarily applied, recognizing that Youngstown, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, so many communities have begun embracing that natural asset and putting priorities, understanding that while it was a tool, it was a tool that wasn't thoroughly utilized and leveraged, that it can be both an economic driver but a quality of life driver. The notion of being able to reorient the community to the river for things like recreation, for things that just add to the property values. The challenges that also come with being a river town when flooding and things like that. But that natural asset that is a draw for people who are here and living here and people who aren't here. You talked about the notion of education, and the foundation has a decades-old commitment and investment in education, from literally early childhood, as I pointed out with the work of Richard and his team, through K through 12 with Sarah and Jackie and the entire team there. And we have no doubt that will continue to be a focus. What we're looking at is how we have made those investments in education, where have they been impactful, what have we learned, and what is necessary going forward, because we don't want to take for granted that the way we've done it in the past is the way that it needs to be done moving forward. If it is, that's fine. We want to know that, but we don't want it to be because we were unwilling to have those conversations. So to the extent that we've seen the entire spectrum, as a matter of fact, Jackie, I think, pointed out to me that this room, where's Jackie? There, was a result, came together as a community asset. Between our early childhood. Oh, very good.
Veronica's from East Hartford Public Schools and was part of envisioning this teaching and learning center.
Good, good. And then Richard was pointing out to me earlier today that every elementary school in East Hartford is benefiting from a tool that was developed to assess the readiness of kindergarten students that then allows it to be tailored to their assessment level and where they are and where they might need some strengthening, can be tailored to a neighborhood level that then brings partnerships between families and teachers. So things like that, tools like that are important to individual communities are investments that we have made and that we'll continue to make. But we want to make sure, again, that they are relevant, impactful, and ultimately lead to long-term gains in the community. You pointed out the libraries. Every one of the communities that we serve has a library, and oftentimes these meetings have been at those libraries. So to the extent that libraries play an even broader role than they did. I know when I was a kid, it was about, going and checking out the book, and that was pretty much the extent of it. Understanding that while that's a role, they play a key role in being a technological bridge to a lot of citizens who still don't have high-speed access. And that's something that is often taken for granted in this country, when virtually it seems that we all walk around with our iPhones and our Androids that have more computing power than was necessary to put astronauts on the moon. But in this, in our communities, there are still individuals that don't have that access. So to the extent that libraries play an important role, a critical role in that, and bringing that that benefit, and Bill Clinton years ago talked about the digital divide that is as critical for the success of our students today as the basic reading, writing, and arithmetic skills that we focused on so many years ago. So thank you.
I just wanted to say a couple of things that that are worrisome in town is, of course, there's always our perception. We have a perception that it's unsafe to come here, which is not true. We have a perception that our schools are bad, which is not true. Everyone who works here and lives here knows that's definitely not true. So overcoming that perception. Also, transportation for a lot of our families. A lot of our families do not have their own transportation. Buses stop at 5 or 6 o'clock. So when we want our parents to come out at night to something, they can't get there. And a lot of times you can't transport them yourselves. The good things that I do like about is that the collaboration in town, it's wonderful. The Parks and Rec work with people. The mayor's office works with the superintendent. There's a great collaborative. One of the things is I work for First Choice Health Centers, and we have a dental bus or van, and we go to 57 schools, and we provide dental on site, so parents don't have to miss work, and parents and kids don't have to miss a full or half day of school. We do cleanings and restorative, and that van has just been in the past few months licensed for medical. So now we're going out to senior centers and working with senior centers in there to do podiatry, and we're hoping to work with the East Hartford Housing Authority, this complex, to go into their family centers to do physicals for schools, because we know that's a big issue. Families have a hard time getting down, so if we can bring it to them and we can do those physicals. So, and we'll be approaching the school and the Housing Authority, and I know that we'll have partnerships with them, but it's that sense that we all work together for the whole family that is really great about East Hartford. You don't have that in every community.
And when you say it's 57 schools, are those
Those are
throughout
all
multiple
in,
communities?
Manchester, Vernon, but we
good.
do all the schools here in
Okay,
East Hartford.
good.
So, so it's a great service. People love it.
Well,
so.
thank you. And to the extent that we do or can help facilitate those types of partnerships and collaboration, it is very much at the core of what we're looking to hear from our stakeholders. Yes.
Hi. I don't live in East Hartford. I live in New Britain and work in Hartford. But I just learned that some of my favorite people live in East Hartford. But I'm here because we do have a number of employees, staff in the organization that live in East Hartford, and we also have a number of clients that come from the East Hartford area. And so I don't know if that's something that is prevalent in other organizations, that they're providing services to people that cross borders to get those services, and whether the foundation is, able to look into that and potentially look at ways of collaborating cross borders.
Absolutely. That is something that we have seen from a number of our partners. We were, I think our first session was out in Hebron. It was Marlboro, Hebron, Andover, and Bolton. And they pointed out a number of collaborative endeavors that they have, because the truth is, in some of the smaller communities, duplicating or replicating a service is fiscally inefficient. It's just not a sustainable approach. And they pointed out a couple of very poignant examples of how the collaboration across board. In fact, the center that we had it at was an example of a center that 3 of those communities really came together to use as a meeting point, use as a service point. That is something that we very much encourage and seek to incentivize, because there are finite financial resources at the foundation, certainly from public funding, from private generosity. And to the extent that we can help facilitate those partnerships financially and also through our nonprofit support program. We've got a team, and I thought I saw some of the folks here from NSP. We've got a team that really works with organizations to provide them consultants and experts that can help align some of the missions. And it's not always easy. You've got boards of directors who are very well intended and the staff who are very committed to their mission. And sometimes the efforts are seen as competitive, and that's not always healthy. What we'd like to do is if there's a mission to address a particular need in the community, and that can be addressed more effectively, more efficiently through some means of collaboration, we as a foundation aren't going to dictate. The boards are going to make their decisions, the staff is going to make their decisions. But what we want to do is be able to perhaps incentivize or at least facilitate a conversation that says, it's more important that the services be provided, that the citizens be taken care of, that the needs are met, and less important, often about who's doing it as long as it's being done effectively. And we give kudos to those organizations that have on their own recognized that. Organizations have come to us and we've provided transitional operating support for organizations that understood that the trajectory that they were on wasn't necessarily sustainable, but they knew that this was a key service to the community, and they had already started having conversations about mergers, about collaboration, about alignment of mission. And to the extent that helps keep those services in those communities and even beyond the borders of those communities is something that we are very much supportive of. So thank you. And I tell the staff, as I always encourage the staff to jump in and share their expertise. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So first of all, I don't work for I'm not an employee or related to an employee. I'm just a mother of young children. And one of the things I really liked when I moved here was because I moved here from the DC area, and it's such a large population that finding space to do things was very challenging. And then moving here, I was like, wow, we have a limited population comparatively and so many resources. And I would love to see those resources utilized more fully than they have been in some ways. I'm a little unique because I actually grew up here. My family's from here. And then I moved away for 20 years and have recently moved back. So this is my 4th year back. And in the DC area, I got very involved in the arts. My children were very involved in the arts. And when I moved here, I was disappointed to find not as much extracurricular outside of school art available. Right. And we all know that extracurricular is very important because not all of life is in school. Kids need to make community friends elsewhere. Sports, we all know that sports are very important, and I remember back in the early 1980s when the focus in this town really went towards sports because it was proven that the teams were very helpful for the students. Well, we've since proven that arts are exactly just as helpful and even maybe a little more so in emotional education and communication, and I would really like to see more of that available on an extracurricular level to my children, because not everybody's built to play football or basketball. So I would really like for the arts-focused type personalities to have a consistent extracurricular place to go to form their community and their cliques. I also have a 12-year-old. Okay. So he's right on the cusp of really needing a place to go to have his clique, and I would really like it to be the quirky art kids who right now don't really seem to have a consistent space. Right. There'll be like a six week long program here or there, but you can't create community in 6 weeks. Right. So these kids aren't able to create cohesion. And I think also the inconsistency has lent itself that most of the population doesn't even look anymore. Right. So even when the occasional acting class is offered, nobody signs up because it doesn't even occur to them to look around because it's been so inconsistent. And I really think we have the space available in this town, and it's just not being utilized to its fullest. We have all the resources, and with a little bit of cohesion and cooperation and administration, I think we could really do a lot, especially in the arts department around here.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And you will be pleased to know Judy Rossi Battle is here. We are, and I'll ask Judy to talk about it, As you speak, we are collaborating with the Greater Hartford Arts Council and other organizations to do sort of a needs assessment of the landscape of some of the arts organizations. If you just talk a little bit about that, Judy.
Working with the state of Connecticut Department of Cultural Arts and also with the Greater Hartford Arts Council. And we're attempting to look at sort of where the gaps are in our region. We started with Hartford, but decided we needed to look beyond that region. So we're doing some of that work now. It's not easy bringing 3 organizations together, so we sit here and say, you all should collaborate. It's been interesting just to share, but we are going to be looking at sort of what the gaps are, what some of the needs are. The other piece of it, which is not going to answer your question directly, but really is that arts are a workforce economic driver. And we're really trying to look at who's being employed, what the number of employees, the types of employees that are, giving back to the community and participating in the economy. So it's a broad study. It's going to take a little while, but we're hoping to do it in pieces.
What we've also found is that sometimes there's not an awareness of all of the opportunities that exist here. The arts organizations, some of them are, they're doing their thing. They don't have the resources necessarily to make it well known. They are eager to be more connected. So to the extent that, we can help raise the level of awareness of the opportunities that do exist, ideally, you want them close and in your community. And if that, the second best is having it somewhere, that is very reachable, that can be, as you talked about your 12-year-old son. I mean, you don't want him to have to travel, half an hour or 45 minutes away to engage in this. So to the extent that we can help identify those things. And I just love the fact that you brought your kids. How old are these two?
This one is 5 and this one is 9.
5 and 9. So my wife and I just spent the past 6 years in D.C. and had that same experience. So Youngstown and Hartford have a lot of similarities. That's where we grew up and what we were used to. And then in D.C., you're absolutely right. I mean, the density, the pace, getting involved, especially, and I only had one child. My wife, the challenges that you faced in terms of getting plugged into a community and spending all the time and energy and the effort, it does go to sometimes what was raised earlier, the perception. We can be our own harshest critic. Sometimes it takes, going and having an experience in another community to appreciate what we have here. So, while I enjoyed the experience in D.C., the notion of being able to come and do work in the communities that I love and am engaged in, and at the same time be able to, take my son to soccer practice or go see his piano recital and have him engage in, activities that are really about a quality of life is something that is really exciting to me. And, I'm new. But I also came from a community that was very hard on itself. And there are very real issues in the communities, and a number of the issues are sometimes we can be also, we can invoke self-inflicted, issues challenges upon ourselves. But that perception is something that is very real. And to the extent that us, when I say us, I mean, I've been here 8 months. I mean, but I'm a resident now. We're here. But those who have been, whether you've been here 8 months or 80 years, the notion of appreciating the assets that this community does have, acknowledging the challenges, but appreciating those assets, does go a long way into how we think and act, as individual communities, but also as a region, which we've heard time and time again. So thank you for sharing that, and that is something that we've also heard in other communities, the importance of having those places that appeal to the creative inclinations and talents that we have, and we've heard it both for young people, but also for people across the age spectrum. So thank you for sharing that. Yes. I saw your hand. Can't be shy now. You put it up there. Right.
No, I just wanted to go after another parent. So I'm a parent, and I grew up here. I have 3 kids in the elementary school system, and the schools are falling apart. They are old, and they need a lot of renovation, and obviously the town doesn't have the money for that, but I'm not going to sell that for you. So our school lacks a handicap accessible playground, and we have a ton of kids. In each school, our school, a lot of the school districts that they have, they're attached to town parks, so they have great playgrounds. Ours at Pitkin, which I know many of you were there for the EDI Olympics, which is great. My kids love that, and they love that their blacktop now is permanent, and they have something else to do. But if those that were there noticed, that playground is small. It is 17 years old. and it is not handicap accessible. And our school houses the medically fragile children in town, which is a classroom of 17. They all have some limitation to one extent or another, and 8 of them are in wheelchairs. So ever since my kids were in the school for, second grade, I've been complaining about that playground every year. And the principal's like, I know, Lauren, there's nothing we can do. We've gone to the Board of Ed, and I know there's nothing they can do. But so I got a couple of parents, and we are actually in the process of forming a nonprofit. That paperwork's just pending. But so we're trying to raise money to build the town's first handicap accessible playground. And we have, since November we started officially, we have over 12,000. And I think that's something that our town could benefit from. Because when those kids go out to recess, now they have the blacktop,
Right.
which is great, thank you. But a great big playground would be good for this town. No more going to Glastonbury or West Hartford or any other rich town to go have a great play day after school or on the weekends.
Right.
If you want to keep them here, we should be able to come here as a taxpayer and play in our own town and stay here.
So I would invite you, let's sit down and have a conversation
I don't want
about that. And those are, absolutely. So, there are, issues like that that are, would benefit the entirety of the community. And to pointing out that those children, that need a handicap accessible playground, but that isn't sort of just, okay, that's for them, the one that brings children together, who need to make use of it, and those who might not need that particular, but playing in that same area and the benefit that has for that type of, cultural enrichment. So, again, we're going to, you and your group, invite you to have a conversation about, issues of how we can talk about, bringing things like that into fruition. Part of what we want to do is there are ongoing conversations we're having with communities, but we also want to talk about what are ways that we can help the community establish, a resource that then becomes a place that, they can leverage resources from local businesses, from, state, from national, organizations that want to be philanthropic. So let's talk about the playground, but beyond that, really talk about how we can leave something as a result of these conversations. And we're not taking for granted that you're spending, this time with us, and nor is this where, we're having a conversation and then that's the last you'll hear from us. We are taking this and using it, as I said, to both inform our next strategic plan, but also really to figure out how to deepen and strengthen a relationship we have with those communities. So we're going to talk about the playground and also talk about how we perhaps establish a mechanism that when issues like that come up within the community, that there are resources that the community can tap into, when, again, the city does the best it can. And I know Mayor Claire, and I've had a chance to engage with her, and I know, I've met with the superintendent and some of the other, and there are always, a dearth of resources, but things like that, that can really be a shining spot in the community to bring people together, I think are certainly areas where we want to figure out how we can help. So let's talk about the playground and other ways to help the community to generate resources to address some of those issues. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, please.
I was born in East Hartford. I've lived here have lived here my entire life. My children were raised here and went to school. And I think it's true, the perception out there about what East Hartford is like, and there's so many tremendous things. I mean, when my kids went to high school, there were children from 50 different countries. So when the history teacher was teaching, she just didn't talk about a country. She turned to the child that came from that country and said, talk about your experience with this. And my older daughter is in international law, and that was one of the, meeting all these different children, I think it helped her decide what she wanted to do. So that's something we really need to publicize and do a better job of talking about in East Hartford. I think one of the concerns is a lot of the businesses, like a lot of towns, are moving down south to cheaper locations. So taxes have gone up, which makes East Hartford a difficult community to afford for some families. Since we bought our house, our taxes have almost tripled. So I'm very grateful that people like your foundation are coming in and helping to support the community. Because those businesses that used to be such good neighbors aren't there like they used to be. So thank you for that.
Well, again, we are, that is absolutely why we exist, and that would be impossible without the generosity of donors from across the region. And one of the beauties, of this notion is that when people are philanthropic toward the organization, people who, live in Avon or Glastonbury, 99% of the time they aren't saying, hey, here's some resources and you want to make sure you take care of Glastonbury. They're saying, here are some resources, take care of the needs of the region. Whether they're in East Hartford or Manchester or Tallinn or Hebron, it doesn't matter. And that's, I think, what we also want to be able to do is to demonstrate how the generosity within this region, when businesses have a critical role, but as the state struggles, with larger structural issues, where can philanthropic organizations, and specifically us as a community foundation, really step in? We will never, fulfill the role. The state, the governor, the legislature, elected officials, there's an obligation. We put them in office, they got to make tough decisions. And I can say that having been in that position, and we expect them to exercise political courage and do the right thing. That being said, there's still, limited resources. So that's where we are wanting to be a more valuable and impactful partner. The conversations that we have with the mayors, the conversations that we have with the state representatives and the council members and the first selectmen and women are about how can we leverage those resources that are a direct result of the generosity, but at the same time still make sure that they understand we're not here to supplant the decisions or resources that are the absolute obligation of the public sector. So through those partnerships, and the other thing is that we are open to imagining new ways of doing business, new partnerships. And some of the best ideas, or most of the best ideas, come from these conversations, come from those partnerships and those stakeholders. So to the extent that those relationships, those public-private partnerships can help advance that, we are very much to that. Part of what we've also done is we engage in public policy, and for instance, the state legislature convened a commission on fiscal stability and economic growth. We thought it was important because those are structural issues that impact the entirety of our community, that we lend our voice to that. Not saying that, which proposal is right or wrong, but saying that kicking the can down the road is no longer acceptable. But we also understood it would be more powerful if we collaborated ourselves with other community foundations. So what we do is, although the Hartford Foundation is the largest and the oldest community foundation in the state, and one of the largest and the oldest in the country, we understand the importance and the power of collaborating with our other fellow community foundations. So the Community Foundation of Greater New Haven, the Fairfield County Community Foundation, the Eastern Connecticut Community Foundation are all foundations and others that we work with, especially when it comes to issues of statewide concern. Between those four foundations, we cover a significant part of the state's population, and we are the larger of the four foundations. So to the extent that we put our voice together on those issues of public concern and public interest are also things that we're trying to do to really raise the level of conversation and take more risk. That's the other thing that we have been very conservative and cautious, and will continue to be a very trusted steward with the financial resources. But we think that sometimes you've got to stick your neck out a little bit. You've got to put your voice or weigh in on an issue, and especially if that issue intersects with our values and our mission. We don't think that, just because somebody say, well, you guys should just be quiet and just give out money. Well, we appreciate that. But there are issues now that intersect with the values and the priorities that we have, that we think it's important that our voice and the voice of stakeholders are raised and elevated. So to that extent, that's another area that we've been more actively engaged in, is that public policy. And it's not partisan, it's not about Democrat, Republican, or pick and can. We can't by law engage in any of that, and that wouldn't be useful, and that's not what we're doing. But to the extent that you've got public policy issues that are impacting, whether it be, to your point, the taxes, whether it be how state resources are or not allocated towards certain priorities, that we can show that data that would help validate those positions. We think it's important as a community foundation that we are a resource for our stakeholders in that regard also. Yes, sir.
You've mentioned going around to the different communities in the Hartford area, greater Hartford area. So you must be getting an idea of what the most common issues are. If you could take a minute, not yet, to identify what some of those are, and then would it be possible for the foundation to set some priorities based on what you see the most common critical issues are, and set up a grants program where, in order to get that grant, 3 or 4 municipalities within the greater Hartford area have to work together to come up with a way to address one of those major issues and agree to share that result with, the other communities, perhaps serving it as a model, or perhaps, just evaluating whether or not it's doable on a sustainable, basis.
Boy, it's as if you've been sitting in our planning sessions, for quite some time. Yes, as we've gone through the communities, there are some common themes that we've heard. One of them being transportation, the challenge of there isn't, while there's the fast track and the bus systems, but how there are still some very significant gaps in transportation within some of the communities. Another issue that we did here is planning and housing. How to create, in some communities it's been a town center that is attractive to commerce and small businesses. In others it has been housing. Sometimes how to bring and integrate affordable housing and accessible housing into the community. We've heard a common challenge among a gathering place, intergenerational gathering place that really is a center of activity and engagement, whether it be arts or educational assistance or things like that. So those are some of the common themes that we've heard, and you are right on the money in terms of as we think about how to incentivize collaboration. And we very much want to challenge those communities because, like I said, we don't have the best and the easiest ideas or answers, the quick fixes to all of this. But that notion of being able to challenge the communities that we serve and saying, we're willing to put some resources on the table. We're willing to bring, whether it's financial resources or expertise from other communities across the region or beyond that have dealt with similarly situated similar challenges. So as we move forward, that is very much a part of what you will hear and see more from us, is hearing what those priorities are. Those priorities are going to help inform, our strategic plan, but those priorities will also help to inform how we, make resources available. So, I love that you're bringing these things up because, one, it helps to validate and underscore the conversations we've been having internally, saying, okay, this is an approach that we're putting, but we don't want it to be just because we're sort of, it becomes an echo chamber. We need to hear and understand that this is a priority, this resonates with our stakeholders. And, with unsolicited, without showing you a meeting that we had, over the past couple of days, a number of these issues have absolutely been discussed, and we've been asking ourselves how we go about answering those questions, how we go about making sure that we have the right data, the right information. So challenging those communities to bring ideas and thoughts to those common issues. And I think, the other thing is it poses an opportunity for us to potentially attract resources from outside of our region. There is no reason that, while we are a regional community foundation, I want us as a foundation to be in a position that when, national organizations, national funders, private funders, public funders say, here's an initiative that we want an area that we think this might be a good pilot. We want them to look at the greater Hartford region and say, we've got communities with these challenges, and there's a partner on the ground in the Hartford Community Foundation that's willing to bring, whether it's matching resources that are necessary, that's willing to bring thought leadership, that's willing to serve as a convening entity, saying, hey guys, there's this opportunity that requires, a half dozen communities getting together to focus on this particular challenge. Who's in and are we up to it, and what can we do to bring that together? What I love about this community is that it's, the community is still large enough that these issues that we tackle and might get some traction on, they're relevant. And there's communities in the Midwest and in the West and in the South and the Pacific Northwest that would love to learn from, what we're doing here. But the community is also small enough to be able to see that impact. We can get the right folks in a room. You can get a half dozen mayors and superintendents and community stakeholders to show up to a meeting and have a discussion and make a decision without going through a lot of bureaucracy and ego-driven and political ideology. So I think it really puts us in a sweet spot to challenge ourselves to that notion. So thank you for bringing that up. And if there are issues that the communities identify, we also want, this is a two-way street. Not that we just identify, but communities saying, hey, we're working together and we've got this challenge or this issue that we'd like the foundation to help us, give some thought to or bring some resources to. So that's the other thing that's critically important, is that, part of what we've heard in some of our conversations is that there's a perception, misperception about how to approach the foundation. And we appreciate people said, there's some that have seen this as being a little distant, or, it's like, well, it's a large foundation. We're not quite sure. We're a small nonprofit, or we're a stakeholder. We don't know what the relationship is. How do we approach the foundation? We want to be seen, again, as a partner, as a resource, as a tool. If it's a conversation with some of the staff, if it's a discussion around a potential approach or a proposal, we don't want to be seen as this opaque, mysterious sort of organization that, we're not quite sure what they do. They invest, they give grants, but we're not sure how to have that conversation. I can tell you that every staff member who is here, you can pick up the phone, you can send an email, they will go out of their way to have a conversation with you about that issue. And if it's not their area of expertise, they will, connect you to someone either within the foundation or within a broader community. And that's the other thing. Sometimes it isn't always about, oh, we need a grant from the foundation. It's, here's an issue, we're not quite sure where to go. So what we're also doing is building a body of research and knowledge to share with the community about issues that are important to the community. So, just think of us, we want people to be as comfortable and familiar with the foundation as you are, borrowing a cup of sugar from your next door neighbor. Because again, this is your community and we're your community foundation, and we appreciate that. And that comes through, with conversations like this. It comes through when, we're not just doing this to check a box. And the staff is here, they have families, they have priorities, they've got kids and dinners to fix and things they've got to do. And, when we do this, they don't get to come in like at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning because, I wouldn't mind if they did. Be careful. But they're here because they care. They're here because they live in this community too. And more than just as a employee of the foundation, they're here as a stakeholder as much as anything else. So, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. I'm from Pittsburgh.
You're from Pittsburgh.
I get what you're saying.
You get it.
I totally get it.
Love Pittsburgh.
But it's a great city. It's not what people think.
Right.
So it's the whole perception thing. It's the eds and meds and
Yep.
tech and everything, and
Yep.
people don't understand.
Yep.
That's what East Hartford has. I understand what you're saying about perceptions. I work with older adults in East Hartford. There are lots of perceptions about our senior center. It's a yucky place with really great services.
Right.
And we're getting a new senior center. And that's wonderful, but I want it to be a state-of-the-art senior center that can really be something that older adults in this community are proud of. And they deserve it because they've been in a yucky place for a long time.
Right.
And I get what you're saying about the schools and everything too, but I really think that's a priority in town.
I'm glad to hear it. And again, that's also something that we heard from one of our other communities in terms of making sure it is a place that is vibrant, not a place, again, not great services, but people just kind of, don't enjoy being there. Or it's, first of all, it's because it's what our seniors deserve. Secondly, we have seen the benefits of having a senior center that is also a place that people who aren't seniors want to come to. So that multi-generational, intergenerational dynamic between our seniors and our young people. And I say that from firsthand experience. My mother is with us here, so to see, Sonia and I, our 7-year-old son Ethan, being able to interact with his Nana, on a regular basis, which, is both comical in one respect and numbingly frustrating in another, as we, lay down the law and the hammer, and the Nana's Nana. So there's always some caveat as to why, the house rules don't apply, but that's another story. But you're right. And, again, would welcome a conversation about, as this senior center is, being developed, or so a new one is on its way, but would welcome a conversation about how we might be a partner in ensuring that, this senior center has the amenities and has the features and the characteristics that make it, one that this community really is proud of, that other communities aspire to see as a model. So we welcome that conversation.
Hi.
Hey.
So I am a family community liaison at Hockanum School.
Okay.
And one of the things that I've been able to accomplish in the district is to start a grandparent friendship circle.
Grandparent friendship circle.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's open to all of the grandparents in East Hartford Public Schools.
Mm-hmm.
So once a month we get together and we talk about some of the challenges that are facing grandparents in this community, because a lot of them are helping to raise their grandchildren, if not with full custody, but with partial custody, or just babysitting on the weekends, or helping to pick the kids up from school.
Which is huge.
Yes.
Right.
So I'd like to be a part of that conversation, and to invite my grandparents in the group to be a part of that conversation when it starts, because I think they would be a great asset to that community center.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's the other thing that we discovered here, and we've seen that before, where organizations that were in the same community were perhaps aware of one another, but weren't aware of some of the challenges or things that were going on, that as a result of coming here, having a conversation with us, we're able then to have a conversation and figure out new ways to collaborate. So to the extent that as we have that broader community conversation, having those grandparents there, I'm assuming they'd be welcome. I'm sure they would be. And again, that's exactly why, so to the extent that there's a collaboration potential there, how can we help enhance that? What can we do to help facilitate that across the board, whether it's, in that regard, the senior center, education, the arts, economic and community development, as we've been talking about. So we, want to make very judicious use of your time. Appreciate, certainly want to, yeah.
I just have a question from Facebook.
Oh, very good.
Facebook question posted. Yes, take it away. On the mic. On the mic.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tom. This question is from an East Hartford resident named Lawana Boisette. She couldn't make it to the event tonight, but wanted to write in with this. She says the main things she would like to see done are family-oriented businesses in East Hartford, such as movies and roller skating, as well as programs for boys and girls, like summer youth programs and things throughout the year. She says these exist outside of the community, but sometimes they're not affordable, or they're only open to people from the other towns, and there doesn't seem to be a ton in East Hartford for East Hartford residents.
Okay. So we do post we published a summer youth guide, and I'll ask Judy just to talk about that as a resource if she was not aware of it.
Yes, every year we partner with the Hartford Public Schools to publish a summer program directory, and it's for Greater Hartford youth. And East Hartford is actually one of the target populations, along with Hartford, that we target all our campership money and other resources for the summer. So I really appreciate your raising this, sure. And in fact, the summer programming is very important to us. We've been at it a very long time.
So do we have to type our answer back, or is this live Facebook? How do we make sure we? Okay. And then the other issue she brought up that we had mentioned, again, community development. To the extent that East Hartford certainly benefits from having, you know, an employer like Pratt & Whitney here, a world-class manufacturer in aerospace. That being said, you know, the notion of being able to support small businesses and entrepreneurs. And I know, you know, I've enjoyed, as you know, one of the things I like to do at lunches is sort of drive around and, you know, the Italian restaurant right across from Pratt & Whitney. I don't know if it's Main Street. Carmine's, yeah. Like 2 weeks ago was, you know, as if I needed a lunch like that, but nevertheless, enjoyed myself tremendously. And small businesses like that are really, you know, iconic and within the community that help to diversify the economic base. So, you know, that's another area, as I mentioned, that we're a community foundation. You know, we work and collaborate with economic development organizations like the Metro Hartford Alliance, like Chambers of Commerce, but we really, you know, want to orient ourselves more to helping to figure out how to bring resources that bring a sense of economic vibrancy and diversity to the towns that we serve. Again, we have appreciated, you know, this dialogue and discussion, and you know, the staff who is here to capture and to respond. The fact that we take this back, and after each one of these listening sessions, we come back and have an internal discussion about what we heard, you know, what we could improve upon, and also start talking about how we then are going to come back to you and engage you in a way that is substantive and meaningful. And I'll put the invitation out now, and you'll get a more formal invitation. In November of this year, we have our annual event that is really about celebrating our donors and the relationships that we have. And, you know, everyone who has, you know, taken time out of their schedule to attend one of these conversations with us is going to receive an invitation from us. And a part of what we'll talk about there is our conversations throughout the 29 towns that we serve, but then also talk very specifically about things that we're going to do that are a direct result and a direct reflection of the conversation. So again, this isn't a once-off where we think we've done a great job because we had a you know, an hour-and-a-half conversation and engagement with you. We are taking these things to heart, so you will see some of these things reflected in our next strategic plan. You'll also see it reflected in some of the things that we do, you know, as a community foundation specific to the town of East Hartford. So I want to thank you all for, again, taking time out of your busy day and all the priorities that you have to come have this conversation. I can't tell you how important it is and how valuable it will be to us really formulating, you know, the direction and the priorities of the foundation over the next several years. So if there are not any final questions or comments, again, please, Congress, rotisserie, plenty of sandwiches back there, dessert and everything else, and look forward to our ongoing relationships. And for those individual, you know, the community center conversation, the playground conversation, please make sure, you know, either you get, the staff has got your contact information so we can help continue those conversations. Thank you all very much. Have a great evening. Thank you.